let's see, I had a partner, his name was Bruce Minton, see? And we were supposed to put up $3,000 each. But this man who Minton knew went to the CIO, which was just organizing at the time. And we had some kind of a dummy that we made up or something, and there was a piece in it about, well, you've seen the first issues about the CIO and its troubles with the AFL and all like that. And they went out, and I think they got us 3,000 trial subscriptions. I forget now whether there were 50 cents or something. Yeah, 50 cents a trial subscription. And I don't remember now what the subscription price per year was eventually. $1 maybe? $1. It says so on it? Yeah. 50 issues for about 2 cents a copy, mind you. Well, do you realize that we could mail issues 47 copies to the pound for post office rate 2 cents? That was, that was started by Abraham Lincoln. He thought that would be the way to civilize the West. You see, the gold rush was followed by the opening of the West, by colonies and all that. And he wanted all second-class mail to go at 2 cents a pound. So the New York Times today weighs several pounds, you see. But I could get this one sheet folded up to look like a 4-page newspaper. I could get 47 copies in 1 pound. Imagine sending 47 copies through all 48 states of the United States for 2 cents. The postage was nothing. It was the cheapest thing about it. The printer's bill was the main thing. Incidentally, I have a list, I think it's in the desk here somewhere, of 200 newspaper men whose names I've never revealed. In fact, when I got letters from them, I used to cut out with the scissors. I didn't just cross them out because there might be some kind of an electronic machine that could read through it, and there are such things, I cut out, and I have an envelope here with names of all sorts of people, like, for instance, Jack Anderson, who worked for Drew Pearson, would always send me news items that he said, this is a little bit too hot even for us. So you want to take a chance on going to jail? You print this. So, and of course I did. And I print things about J. Edgar Hoover too. Never, until the end. At the end, oh, you want to know how Hoover put us out of business? We started getting letters. The first one was from Marfa, Texas. That's why M-A-R-F-A. It was a recruiting base for the American Army where they got these for the Second World War. And the postmaster at Marfa wrote me saying, an agent of the FBI has arrived, sent here by J. Edgar Hoover. He has permission from the Post Office Department to sit in the office and look through the mail every day when it arrives. You see, and when the mail arrives with your magazine, he's been here a week or two, so in case he missed it the first week, he takes a list of every subscriber to your magazines. Then army camps, post offices, everybody told me the same thing. J. Edgar Hoover is making a list of subscribers to, in fact, for somebody. You see, well, I wrote him all sorts of letters, And I think the last one is in the desk here to show it to you. No, it did not from him. But he denied it all. And then, towards the very end, you see, when everybody, they all got cold feet. Some man wrote saying it's worth $100 a year to get your weekly, which was sold for $2 a year. Will you put each one into an envelope, you see, and send it without any return address on it, and send it. It'll only, at that time, 2 cents postage, you know, things like that. Well, I wouldn't do that, you see. But I had many such offers. I don't know, another man offers $100 a year if I'll send it secretly to him. No, I wouldn't do it. So we went out of business, of course. Because people, I mean, there was one time where we'd get 3,000 subscriptions a week would come in. But no effort on our part. The whole CIO was on our side, you know. The CIO was going great guns at that time. It was beating, it was a very fair and square outfit with labor. And there were a lot of scandals about the old AFL, you know.
Well, when the Cold War began,
yeah,
did in fact blow the whistle on the Cold War? Did it say it was starting, that something was wrong here? Did it say,
oh yes, I mean, look, there was no subject of which, when we got the evidence, we published the whole set, and I always ran a little piece, a paragraph in each issue, saying that any statement and any misstatement, any error will be corrected. I only had one attempt at they asked for a correction, and that was from Winston Churchill's son, Randolph Churchill. I ran a piece this big, and which said, "The Daily Telegraph of London, one of the most reliable papers in the world, reports that Randolph Churchill, Winston's son, has accepted $20,000 to go to Spain to write favorably about Franco and his march on Madrid, on the siege of Madrid." And I got a letter from Churchill's attorney saying it wasn't so, and asking for a correction. So in the next issue, I said, "The Daily Telegraph report, which we published last week, has been denied," you see. So they wrote back to me and said, "We want you to apologize. We don't want the Daily Telegraph." So I wrote back saying, "It's a Daily Telegraph item, and I credited the Daily Telegraph in the first issue, and therefore when I retracted, I say that we were sorry we published the Daily Telegraph office, which you say isn't true. We want your apology." So, what was my name? I had a famous man who had been Attorney General of the United States. He was a volunteer lawyer for me. He never charged me. And, well, he told me that I would win the case, you see, and he wouldn't charge me. See? Then they would take it to a higher court. And he said merely filing an answer to their charges would cost you $500, even if I didn't charge you anything, just to file it. And by the time it went to a higher court, and although you won every case against them, you could be out $25,000 without lawyer's fee. So we simply had to go and say that, in fact, apologizes to Winston Churchill's son, Randolph Churchill. And 6 months later, he went to Spain, you see, for Franco, on Franco's side, and wrote for the Daily Telegraph. Well, what can you do about that? At that time, I reported saying I regret that I'd had to retract my item then, because we knew that the Daily Telegraph the Daily Telegraph sent me a cable. Don't retract it. We're not retracting. We challenged them to sue us, but they wouldn't sue the Daily Telegraph.
Were you ever threatened?
No. That was the only threat I ever had of a suit, was this one time.
Did you ever get threatened?
Never, never, never. And you know, we ran some pretty hot stuff.
Well, what was hot during the Cold War, the beginnings of the Cold War?
Yeah.
What kind of hot stuff did you run?
Well, there's one copy, and they're on good paper and bound, and they're all in that. They're all in that.
We can look at that.
Well, I can't get around to it, but they're on the top shelf there, and that's the only copy that I think it was. I don't know. I think I had 4 copies. There's one at Harvard, one at Dartmouth, and I don't know. I don't know what. And I have one. I don't know who got the 4th. Oh, I guess my assistant. I had an assistant at the end, you know. By the way, my wife and I, she went into the office every day, you see, and we drew $30 each to live on. So she had 30 and I had 30, and we had the house in Connecticut, and we lived there quite well. When we employed an assistant editor, the American Newspaper Guild, which I helped found, actually I told Ruth, what was the name of the founder, Brune, Haywood Brune's wife, Ruth Hale, about the British Association of Journalists. And she said, the first thing we're going to do when the war is over, she said that to Haywood, is to organize the American newspapermen into some sort of a association or union. It's exactly what happened.
And did anyone take offense to that?
Huh?
Did anyone take offense to that?
Oh yes, that's when James of the Times, you know, because I went on with that, you know, and James of the Times says your name will never, and I wasn't mentioned, as I say, never pictured, no book of mine ever reviewed until last year with this lousy review of my 22nd book. So between my 3rd and the 22nd, they never reviewed one of my books or mentioned my name.
Was in fact ever mentioned?
Never mentioned, in fact, refused an ad for in fact. Imagine. Of course, how much could I spend $50 for an ad? You know, a little ad in fact. And the place to put it in would be the New York Times. And they refused it.
Well, you threatened, you were an opponent of the Cold War, am I right? So why did in fact, why did they try to suppress in fact?
Why?
Yes.
Well, because we exposed the dishonesty and falsehood in the newspapers and everything else that was false. I mean, false advertising, false anything. I mean, they simply, well, I mean, look, there was the Nation, the New Republic. There was, for instance, La Folla's Progressive. Do you realize not one of them ever had more than 30,000? And as far as I know, it was probably the same 30,000 what I call the $5 liberals, the 30,000 American $5 liberals who subscribed to the Nation, New Republic, and Progressive, and the New Masses, and all like that. Here we were going great guns. I mean, we were getting 3,000 subscriptions a week at one time. 3,000 a week. And reached 186,000 without any effort whatever.
You say in Witness to a Century,
yeah,
Marshall Foch.
Yes, what about him?
That Marshall Foch began the Cold War.
Yes.
Yes. Could you explain that?
Well, he came down in that special train and had that car in it, the armistice car, to Koblenz. Yes, that was U.S. Army. Yes, that's where we were stationed. Yes.
This is 1919 or so.
Yeah, and he came down to see. Pershing, and as far as I can remember, even all the interviews we had with him and Pershing, and what they gave out to the press and all that, could only be, and mind you, it was just after the World War was ended, and it certainly can be called the beginning of the Cold War.
But
There was no question there that they all thought that there would be a war with Russia and that they had to destroy Russia because the propaganda that was being put out was getting all the working men of all the countries interested. And the only salvation for the capitalist, well, of course they would never use anything, the capitalist system, but what they call the system of equality, liberté, égalité, fraternité. I mean, fraternity, pardon me. I mean, that was the only thing to do, was to destroy this movement before it gets started.
But in 1945, it was after the alliance with Russia during the war and the defeat of Hitler, then another Cold War started, correct? I mean, what happened? Why did the Cold War begin again? Or why was there a new Cold War?
The Cold War always began because of the fear that the Russian propaganda was getting the working people of all countries to overthrow their governments, and one country after another, along the Russian border was coming over to communism, all the way from Latvia all the way to Czechoslovakia, and the next thing would be, of course, Germany, and if Germany went, then Europe was lost, and then the whole world was lost. I mean, and there was a time there that looked that way. I mean, the feeling was that way throughout the world. The feeling throughout the world that way was that this is the first and only time in history that the working men will run a country, and that they've got the men and the brains to do it. And of course, I mean, all these countries started arming themselves against this menace of the East.
Now, what year are you talking about?
Huh?
What year is this?
Well,
1919?
Yes, about 1919 until.
Okay. Now, in 1945, who was responsible for starting the Cold War again? For reviving the Cold War?
Who?
Who was responsible in 1945 for reviving the Cold War? Was it Stalin's fault? Was it Truman? Was it big business?
I don't know if you got me my old 1945. In fact, I might look it up. I can't remember everything,
Okay. But was it?
I mean, was it? I mean, you said reviving. Did it ever? Was it ever stopped? Was there ever any friendship between the two sides shown at any time?
How about when they fought?
Lindbergh's flight, I think, was hailed as the first sign of friendship that was going to be between both sides would now be friends. I think so. I mean, it really meant nothing.
Right. What was the lineup of newspapers that supported the Cold War? Who are the big lords of the press that supported the Cold War?
Well, I don't know of anybody who opposed it. I mean, I don't. I don't consider the Socialist Daily Worker as much of a newspaper, you know.
Now, you mentioned that there were, in the time of Joe McCarthy, and
Yeah.
you went to you were called to a hearing by Joe McCarthy.
Yes, I
What
went.
was that like?
Well, to begin with, I want to say that although we exposed McCarthyism as the greatest menace of the times, to the extent that he permitted me to make a statement, and all that surprised me, because I think that was a square deal. Well, anyway, he was a very dumb crook altogether. He had sitting on each side of him two of the sharpest and crookedest. I guess it's all right to call a dead man that. You won't be sued for libel. Sokolsky and Fulton Lewis Jr. and
Pegler.
huh?
Pegler.
No, Roy Cohen. That's right. Who were they? Roy Cohen and Fulton Lewis Jr. Anyway.
And Nixon, wasn't Nixon?
Huh?
Nixon as well?
Nixon supported them, but Nixon wasn't present at the hearings as far as I know. But who was it? Was it Sokolsky or some? I forgot. They thought they were very smart. In the middle of the hearing, they say, "Pardon me, Mr. Seldes. Repeat the name of the
From the wonderful Sun of London, Daily Sun. The sun never sets on Murdoch's empire. No. What was that joke about? The sun never sets on the British Empire because God doesn't trust it. Well, something equivalent should be said for Murdoch's wonderful paper. This gotcha headline was 1982 headline during the Falkland Maldives Island War. I thought that was about sheep, but it's really, it's really about the oil around those islands.
What a surprise.
And it was a wonderful little war because for Lady Thatcher, because it got her reelected.
Yeah, Maggie.
By a minority, by the way. She had 42% of the vote in the last British election, and she got all the power, dissolved all the local councils, and did a horrible amount
42
of damage.
would win here, too.
But that's democracy.
Yeah, in action.
D-E-M-O-C-K instead of proportional representation.
M-I-C-K-E-Y.
They tell you here that their lad sunk the Belgrano, not sunk, they didn't know yet, damaged the Belgrano. That was a ship that was fired upon outside the alleged war zone that the British had set up. Hundreds, maybe 1,000, I don't have the figures anymore, maybe 1,000 Argentine young men went to their death as a result of that patriotic deed by the British Admiralty. We shouldn't blame all the English for that.
Yeah.
I was just informed that, not to forget that the U.S. at that time resupplied the British fleet somewhere in the Caribbean secretly. That was Reagan's contribution to the death of those
young lads.
sailors.
Yeah.
And as a salute to Murdoch and his papers, we're going to, Coca's going to read a little quatrain by Humbert Wolf.
I'll do my best.
It's down at the bottom here.
Yeah, we have to read along. You cannot hope to bribe or twist, thank God, the British journalist. But seeing what the man will do, unbribed, there's no occasion to.
And,
No applause is necessary.
last but not least,
Yellow? Yellow.
how many of you know the song, Every Little Movement Has a Meaning All Its Own? Nobody. Okay.
Not a one.
Then I'll have to sing it to you. It was a hit of the time. It was turn of the century, I think, the Chicago Exposition in 1898.
All right, no wonder we don't know it.
And, well, yeah, I remember. Don't you remember it? And it was considered very sexy, sort of the Sally Rand of its day. How many of you remember
Sally Rand.
Oh, okay. Let's see. Sort of the Gypsy Rose Lee.
No, we know.
No,
Now we're moving on.
the Madonna of a time.
Heidi Fleiss we're more
Okay.
familiar with. Right.
But I've sort of changed it, and if you'll try to read this, follow this, you'll see how many radical factions there are or were in America today. Just scroll it like that, and then you can sort of see it. And I'll read you. I've sort of changed every little movement has a meaning all its own to. Every little meaning has a movement all its own. Every second stratum by some journal can be shown. And every brainstorm that comes appealing for our being must be revealing all its madness in some appalling little movement. All its own, every little movement. And these are some alternative papers you can see here. You can see there are thousands of them.
I don't see thousands there.
Well, there are hundreds here. There's about 100 on here, but I could have gotten thousands.
All right. I'm sorry.
Now, the catch line to this and the point of this whole collage is, will now be revealed to you by Coca.
Oh. So every little movement has a journal all its own, but not a single daily paper. On the left, the day is known.
So that's what we need.
More left papers to
We
be
need a
known.
daily paper in this country where all these geniuses and all of us lefties can get together and exchange ideas and reach other people. So let's get going on that.
Yeah, right on. Give. Tuli Kuperberg. See him on